You see them everywhere, right? These gigantic modern warehouses. They look like symbols of efficiency, almost indestructible. But what happens when the raw power of nature crashes into a hidden flaw in their design? Today, we're going to break down a tragedy that forces us to ask some really tough questions about safety, planning, and whether a disaster like this was really unavoidable. So let's set the scene. It's December 10th, 2021. An EF3 tornado with winds blasting at 150 miles per hour tears right through an Amazon fulfillment center in Edwardsville, Illinois. In an instant, these huge concrete walls just pancake. 6 lives were lost. This wasn't just a storm, this was a catastrophic failure. And it really makes you wonder about safety inside these mega warehouses.
That's right. 6 people. 6 people who went to work for their shift and just never came home. Their loss forced an entire industry, and the regulators who are supposed to be watching it, to take a long, hard look in the mirror.
And that is the absolute central question we're digging into here. Was this just a horrible, unavoidable act of God, as they say? Or were there deep systemic failures? Failures in how the building was designed and in the emergency plan itself that turned a dangerous storm into a deadly catastrophe. To really get what happened, we have to go back to that night. Because when you look at the timeline of events, you start to see the first cracks in the system, long before any of the walls actually came down. So look at this. They had warnings. The first alert comes in at 8:06 p.m., a full 23 minutes before impact. Another one lands 13 minutes out. But here's the thing. Getting a warning and actually having a plan that works are 2 totally different things. Inside this 1.1 million square foot facility, the response was, to put it lightly, chaotic and tragically fragmented. Okay, now let's shift gears and look at the building itself. To understand why it collapsed so completely, you really have to understand how it was put together in the first place. This warehouse was built using something called tilt-up construction. It's actually a super common, fast, and pretty cost-effective way to build these huge structures. But, and this is a huge but, it has an inherent vulnerability. See, those massive 40-foot-tall concrete walls, they don't just stand there on their own. They depend almost completely on the roof structure to hold them upright. And that right there created this devastating cascade of failure. When those 150-mile-per-hour winds smashed into the west wall, the roof structure was compromised. And once the roof started to go, it was literally like a house of cards. The one thing holding the walls up was suddenly gone, and they just folded inward, crushing everything and everyone below. And this table? Wow, it just lays out the core structural problem so clearly. The warehouse was built to code, no question there. It was designed to handle straight-line winds, maybe up to 100 miles per hour or so. But an EF3 tornado? That's a completely different animal. We're talking 150-mile-per-hour winds. For real life-saving protection in a tornado, you need a shelter built to the ICC 500 standard, something that can take a 250-mile-per-hour hit. The building code was just never meant for this kind of event. All right, so if the building itself isn't a shelter, then the plan to get people to a safe place becomes absolutely everything. So let's take a look at the official safety plan and see how that holds up. The federal OSHA regulations on this are pretty straightforward. Employers are required to have a written emergency action plan. It's got to spell out everything: evacuation routes, alarm systems, how you're going to make sure every single person is accounted for after an emergency. The whole point is to eliminate confusion when every second counts. But on that night, what happened was fatal confusion. The facility's official plan said the designated shelter was a restroom on the north side of the building. And yet every single one of the 6 workers who died had taken cover in a different restroom on the south side, which put them directly in the path of that collapsing wall. And the enormous size of these buildings just makes that kind of confusion even more deadly. We're talking about a space that's over 1 million square feet. A worker might have to travel a really long way just to get to a designated shelter. So clear, simple, unmistakable communication isn't just a nice to have, it's a matter of life and death. And that brings us right to the communication system itself and how it completely fell apart at the absolute worst possible moment. I mean, listen to this. This is a direct finding from the OSHA investigation. The main tool they had for mass communication, a megaphone meant to warn the entire facility, was locked in a cage and nobody could get to it. So because of that one failure, managers were forced to try and warn hundreds of workers by literally running and shouting across a space the size of 20 football fields. It's an impossible task, right? And it led directly to a spotty, chaotic alert
and ultimately to that fatal confusion over where people were supposed to go.
You know, this whole incident just reignited a huge debate about company policies that ban or restrict personal cell phones on the warehouse floor. They're often banned for productivity or security reasons, which makes sense on one level. But in a severe weather emergency, your personal phone can be a direct link to alerts from the National Weather Service. It really makes you ask a critical question. Where do you draw the line between company policy and personal safety?
So what happened after the dust settled? Well, the investigation into this tragedy actually sparked some real, concrete action that's designed to stop this from ever happening again. You can literally draw a straight line from the collapse in December 2021 to new laws. First, OSHA issued what's called a hazard alert letter. It's not a fine, but it's a very strong recommendation for big improvements. That led to the state of Illinois creating a task force, which ultimately led to the passage of the Warehouse Tornado Preparedness Act. And this new Illinois law is specifically designed to close the exact gaps that were exposed by this collapse. It now mandates that these huge warehouses have site-specific emergency plans, that every single worker, including contractors, has to participate in drills, and that any new construction must include structurally sound shelter areas. So what's the key lesson here? It's that an emergency plan sitting in a binder, gathering dust, is completely useless. For a plan to actually work, it has to be realistic for the size of the building. It has to be practiced over and over by everyone on site. And it has to send people to a place that is structurally built to protect them. Preparation saves lives, not paperwork.
And that kind of brings us to the final question, and this one's for you to think about. What about your own workplace? Do you even know if there's a written emergency plan? More importantly, have you ever actually walked the evacuation route or sheltered in the designated spot during a drill? The lessons from this tragedy really do apply everywhere.
If you want to see more breakdowns of real-world workplace disasters and learn the safety lessons that can genuinely save lives, make sure you subscribe to HSEstudy. Thanks for watching, and stay safe out there.